Hi, my name is Whitney Ham, and I'm here with my colleague today, Alissa Brooke, to talk about tips for employers working with employees with autism spectrum disorder, Part 1. Alissa and I have both been in the field for just about a decade now, supporting transition-aged youth with autism spectrum disorders to transition from school into the world of employment. And we are here today to provide a bit of a perspective on what we have learned from working with employers on how to work with individuals with autism in the workplace. First, we wanted to just give you a very brief and broad overview on what autism is. Autism is currently the fastest growing developmental disability compared to other disabilities such as Down syndrome that you might also be familiar with. 1 in 59 children will end up being diagnosed with an autism spectrum disorder, and it is much more common in males than females. And there are currently lots of research studies being done to examine exactly why there has been such a large increase, the 15% increase in the rate of diagnosis, and also why it does tend to be more common in males than females. Autism, as you might know, is known as a social communication disorder, which means that individuals with autism might have difficulty understanding social cues, interacting with others, developing relationships, and also having a normal give and take conversation with other individuals. We'll get into this a little bit more in depth later on in the presentation. Also, Alissa might be popping in too. We like to bounce off each other during these presentations. As an employer, Alissa and I have spent a lot of time working from the supply side, so supporting individuals with disabilities to enter the workplace. And we are trying to take a different spin on this presentation and think about hiring individuals with disabilities from the perspective of an employer. And we think that there are a few reasons why it might be very helpful for you to learn about autism. As we mentioned on the first slide, there is an increasing rate of diagnosis. More and more children with autism, or more and more children are going to be diagnosed with an autism spectrum disorder. Because of this increasing prevalence rate and more children being diagnosed with the disorder, there's going to be an increasing amount of students who are exiting the school system upon the age of adulthood, between the ages of 18 and 22, who will be entering the workforce. In general, the research shows that individuals with autism tend to have poorer outcomes compared to other disability categories. Individuals with an autism spectrum disorder are more likely to either be unemployed or underemployed compared to other disability categories. And as far as quality of life standards go, they are also more likely to have very little access to any extracurricular activities outside of the home. They are more likely to sit at home and play video games on the couch and not have access to any community outreach activities. Also, there are currently lots of federal initiatives that are looking at hiring and improving the post-school outcomes for individuals with disabilities. You all might be familiar with the term the Workforce Innovations and Opportunity Act that is focusing on improving the pipeline of students with disabilities exiting the school system and entering into employment. In order for this to happen, all partners will need to be involved, to include the school systems, vocational rehabilitation agencies who support individuals with disabilities once they've entered employment, also the students with disabilities, their families or support staff, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and finally, employers. You all are a very necessary part of this equation of supporting the employment of individuals with disabilities. And finally, after 10 years of working in the field, we can say that we have heard time and time again that hiring individuals with disabilities and autism bring not only diversity and very needed skills to the workforce, they also improve employer morale and team morale. And they show a lot, they bring value to the workplace, they're motivated to work, and they help remind sometimes typically developing individuals that working is a privilege and it is an honor, and they bring something different to the workforce. So this slide just provides, I think, a nice visual depiction of the major diagnostic criteria that we got into a little bit earlier that go into diagnosing an individual with an autism spectrum disorder. So you can see on the first part, Part A, that there is a social communication disorder. When we think of social reciprocity, we think of that back and forth conversation type where you say something, the individual responds. You might see an individual with autism have a challenging time engaging in that type of conversation. Also, nonverbal communication. So sometimes those hidden social cues, an individual rolls their eyes, might start to walk away, start to look down. Those are ways that we might start to read that this person isn't enjoying this conversation, I'm talking too much, maybe I have bad breath. I have coffee breath this morning. And an individual with autism would have a more challenging time picking up on some of those social cues. And also difficulty engaging in typical peer relationships. Sometimes they tend to interact better with individuals who are younger than they are because of their interests, or oftentimes children with autism might have an easier time interacting with adults because of their interests. Also restricted and repetitive patterns of behavior. I think this is where some of the stereotypes of what autism can look like in the workplace come about. You might see an individual that says the same things over and over again, has certain scripts in their heads. They might appear to be talking to themselves. They might have what sometimes looks like OCD. They do the same thing over and over again. They have to go to the same door, open it the same way, sit in the same chair. You might also see some of the repetitive behaviors or body movements, some of the rocking or the flapping or the clapping. And also, you might see an individual be pretty sensitive to different types of sensory stimulation. They might react to bright lights or bright noises, fire alarms, a little differently than you or I would react to something like that.
What might autism look like in the workplace? It would be impossible for us to sit here today and tell you what to expect each time you hire someone with autism, because just like any other employee that you hire, everyone is going to be different, have their own personalities and idiosyncrasies, which you will come to learn as you get to know that new employee. We put up on this slide some examples that we have come across many times over the years of supporting employees with autism in the workplace. As Whitney said, there's a range of symptoms. Each individual is unique. We've heard this many, many times over the years that if you have met one person with autism, you have met one person with autism. Autism is considered an invisible disability. When you're walking down the street, you may be walking past people with autism and have no idea. Because of the physical characteristics, we're not going to be able to point out specific physical characteristics that you would be able to identify in somebody with autism. Whitney had said that people with autism may end up, talking to themselves or scripting. There's a couple sides to this. Somebody may talk to themselves while they're working and really just be more comfortable keeping to himself or herself, while others may be really interested in getting out there and interacting overly in social situations. So you can have somebody that talks very much or somebody that talks very little. You can have somebody that requires prompts to respond to conversation, or somebody else who frequently interrupts conversation. So it's those challenges with the social cues. Difficulties with changes in routine are another challenge for individuals with autism. Many of the people that we work with like to know what's coming next and feel comforted by routine. And so an unexpected change can be very disruptive and uncomfortable. Individuals with autism may have supports in the workplace in addition to the supports that other employees use. We all use checklists and survive by calendars and cell phone alarms and things like that. Individuals with autism may need more visual supports or additional compensatory strategies, which their job coach can help create, and we'll get into that a little bit later as well. People with autism tend to do best when they have a clear plan and set expectations. Soft skills, again, may be very challenging. And people with autism sometimes may say things that are not necessarily PC, but that other people may be thinking, which can tend to be very honest and refreshing. One of the areas that you may see challenges is also in the break room. What is the appropriate etiquette in the break room? What are appropriate conversation topics to have?
And I also think Alissa touched on the soft skills part, but I think that's an important part for employers to be thinking of, because the research shows that having the appropriate soft skills, the ability to engage with individuals, to hold a conversation, to relate to others, basically to have somebody like you and develop that relationship, that's one of the major factors in an individual not only obtaining a job, but also retaining a job. And Alissa mentioned the word job coach, and we're going to go into what a job coach is specifically in part 2 of this presentation. But those soft skills, I think it could be important for employers to have an awareness of how challenges with those soft skills could impact an individual with a disability, but that it should not be a barrier to them entering the workforce, and that there are lots of supports that their support staff, such as a job coach, can put into place to support individuals with autism to better integrate into the workplace and relate to their coworkers.
Mm-hmm. People with autism bring a number of strengths to the workplace. They, like I said, they thrive on routine and structure, can be extremely focused. Many of us spend a lot of time in our workday probably having more social interactions than necessary. People with autism can really dial in and pay more attention to their work than the people walking by and the other social distractions that we all have at the workplace. People with autism often are really great with attention to detail, great attendance and dependability. One of the guys that we work with, I know because there's that desire to have that routine and that structure, he actually prefers not to go on vacation. And when the family goes on vacation, he gets a little bit anxious and wants to get back to work and get back to that routine and schedule. So his attendance is excellent, and we've seen that a number of times. The follow through with the desire to complete a task. Oftentimes, if you get started on a task, somebody with autism wants to see it through to completion and to accuracy. People with autism may see patterns and details that others miss. With that ability to focus and really hone in and not be distracted by the social pieces that we have at work sometimes, that can be a major strength where they're able to really kind of come in and correct other people's work. There have been a number of times that we have heard from employers that, they noticed that this phone number was wrong and they made those corrections for us, or they caught these typos and this doctor put it in that way and this employee with autism fixed it for us and nobody else noticed it. This is the 10th person to look at it. So really able to see that attention to detail is excellent. And as Whitney mentioned before, improve workplace culture and morale. And I kind of said that too, that it's very refreshing when somebody can tell you exactly what they're thinking and what you're probably thinking too, but know that it's not appropriate to say. But that can be very helpful to have in the workplace. It really does boost team morale a lot of the time. Certainly there are some challenges of working with individuals with autism in the workplace, and we wanted to break it down into saying that there are some challenges and there are some general strategies which you could try to employ. Again, in our case, the individuals that we support often will have a job coach with them, which is a wonderful resource to use. But just in general, these are some suggestions. So in terms of communication challenges, ask the employee to repeat instructions back to you to demonstrate their understanding of what it is that you asked them to do. When providing instructions, it's a really good idea to be direct and concrete. We talk too much and we use way too many words when we're having conversations and we're providing instructions, and I think it's part of that soft skills where we think that we're being friendly. On somebody with autism, that piece can get lost. It's better to be just direct and tell them what you need to be done. And also to model job tasks. That can help to ensure that the individual understands what is being asked of them. In terms of social challenges, it's important to be direct and provide clear expectations of the social behaviors in the workplace. When someone is doing something wrong, you want to let them know. When somebody is doing something well, you want to provide a compliment. I think that goes across the board, but maybe you just need to be more cognizant of it when working with individuals with autism. When you're providing feedback, if somebody is doing something wrong, you want to make sure that you're doing it respectfully and find out which way does that person respond to feedback best. Some people prefer written corrections versus verbal. Some people don't mind being corrected in the moment in public in front of their coworkers, and others really prefer to be done in private. Either way, it's important to make that correction and new instruction pretty immediately so that it doesn't get lost. Go ahead.
Sorry, I think Alissa touches on two really important points there in terms of the social challenges. We've talked about understanding the social cues and that hidden curriculum that a lot of times typically developing individuals understand how to follow in the workplace, when to end a conversation, when to put your phone away, when maybe something that you're talking about, the scary movie that you saw over the weekend, isn't, the other individual isn't enjoying that conversation as much as you are, didn't enjoy that movie. And I think you do want to provide those expectations very clearly, but also to treat the individual with respect as a person who has feelings and emotions as well, even if they're sometimes expressed differently. But also to make sure, I think sometimes when we work with employers or coworkers of individuals with disabilities, they don't want to hurt that person's feelings. Mm-hmm. So then they let some of those broken expectations go for far too long, until to the point that either relationships have been damaged or maybe this person has started to annoy people. So it's important to make those expectations clear and to provide that feedback so that you can use them as learning opportunities.
Yeah, and to build on, starting to annoy people, behavioral challenges in the workplace are something that you may experience with individuals with autism. As Whitney said, the goal is not to annoy somebody. When we are addressing behaviors and looking at behaviors, we are looking at them as a form of communication. So we all engage in behaviors to communicate. Behavior serves a purpose for the individual, especially somebody who verbal communication may be a challenge. Their frustration or confusion may come out in a different way, which seems inappropriate for the workplace. Our role is to help people understand what that person is trying to communicate by that behavior. And rather than getting frustrated and saying, oh, he always, throws his paper down when I ask him to do something, it's important for us to try to reflect on why is he doing that. So when working with individuals who have behaviors in the workplace, again, we want to provide choices to that person. It's important for the people that we work with to feel valued and empowered. And so if we give choices, that's a good strategy so people can feel like they're making their own decisions in the workplace. Independence is very empowering and important. It's a good idea to clarify directions and expectations just as it is with the communication challenges as well. And in terms of sensory challenges, some people may feel really overwhelmed by bright lights or bright colors in the workplace or loud noises or too many people in their workspace or too few people in their workspace. It could really depend on the individual. So the best strategy there is to talk to the individual about what their workplace preferences and their needs are. So in general, rather than telling somebody what not to do, really the best idea is to tell somebody what it is that they need to do. Set clear expectations, and very, very likely that individual really wants to do a good job and will rise to the occasion and meet those expectations that are clearly set.
So we've spent some time today so far talking about introducing you to autism spectrum disorders and talking about all of the skills and abilities that they can bring to the workplace and also some of the challenges that they can also bring. However, we have also gave you guys some strategies on how to address those challenges. And up next, we'll be talking about what the steps are to take if you are interested in hiring an individual with a disability, and also the support staff like Alissa and I that you could have to help you with that process.